Close your eyes for just a second and listen with me. There's a sound I haven't heard in maybe 40 years, and yet I can hear it right now clear as anything. It's the sound of a finger pulling a rotary dial all the way around to the little metal stop and then letting it go, and that slow mechanical whir as it spins itself back. Tick, 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 tick. You did that 7 times to make one phone call, and you waited through every single click. Your grandchildren have never heard that sound. They never will. And the strange thing is, it isn't just the telephone that's gone quiet. A whole world of everyday sounds, the ordinary little noises that filled an American house and an American street in the 1970s, has simply vanished into the air, replaced by silence or by a soft electronic chirp that nobody will ever remember. So tonight I want to gather up 15 of those lost sounds, one at a time, and play them back for you in your mind. I think you'll hear every one of them. And I'll tell you right now, so you have something to listen for, there's one sound near the end of this list, just one, that I have not been able to think about without my throat going tight. It isn't a machine. It's a voice. I'll get to it, but not yet. Let it wait in the back of your mind as we go. So pour yourself a cup of coffee, find your good chair, and settle in with me a while. We're going to take a slow walk back through the sounds of the 1970s, the ones your grandkids will never hear, and I think by the end you're going to feel like you've been home for a visit. And while you're getting comfortable, do me one small kindness. Tell me down in the comments where you grew up, a town, a street, a kind of neighborhood, and whether the sounds I'm about to describe are the same ones you fell asleep to. I read every one of those, and I treasure them. Now, let's begin with the one I just gave you. Number 1. The rotary telephone and that long, lazy spin of the dial coming back home. It sat on a little table in the hall, that phone, heavy as a brick, the color of butterscotch or avocado green, with a cord that stretched just far enough that you could lean against the door frame and twist it around your finger while you talked. To call your friend, you put your finger in the little hole over the right number and you pulled it all the way around until it stopped, and then you let go, and the dial took its own sweet time spinning back. Whirr, click. If your friend's number had a 9 or a 0 in it, well, you settled in, because those took the longest. And if the line was busy, you got that flat, blaring 2-note busy signal and you hung up the heavy receiver with a satisfying clunk and you tried again in 10 minutes. There was no leaving a message. There was no seeing who called. The phone rang and you ran to answer it because it might be anybody and you'd never know unless you picked it up. And here's the thing, folks, forget. You knew the numbers by heart. Not stored in a machine, but right there in your own head, every number that mattered to you, your best friends, your grandmother's, the corner store. All of it learned by the sound and the feel of dialing it so many times your fingers knew the dance without you even thinking. A long-distance call was an event, planned for Sunday when the rates dropped, the whole family taking turns to say a few quick words because every minute cost real money. And if you were a teenager wanting a little privacy, you stretched that long curly cord as far as it would reach, around the corner, into the closet, the door pinched shut on the cord, whispering. We traded all of that for a glass rectangle that lights up silently in our pockets. We gained the whole world, but we lost that whir and the little ritual of patience that came with every single call. And we lost, knowing the numbers of the people we loved by heart, which is a stranger loss than it sounds. Number 2. The busy signal, and I'm going to give it its own moment, because it deserves one. That sound is gone now. Completely gone, and most folks under 40 have never heard it in their lives. Buh, 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 buh. A steady, insistent, almost rude little tone that meant one simple thing. Somebody you wanted was already talking to somebody else. And do you know, there was a comfort in it I didn't appreciate at the time. It meant your sister was home, gabbing away with her best friend, tying up the only line in the house for an hour. It meant your mother was deep in conversation with Aunt Ruth. The busy signal was proof that the people you loved were there, present, connected to somebody. Today, nobody is ever busy. The call just slides over to voicemail, smooth and silent, and you leave your words in a little box and wait. We never hear that the line is full anymore, and in a funny way, we never quite know if anybody's really home. Number 3. The clunk and the hiss of an 8-track tape changing tracks right in the middle of your favorite song. Oh, this one. If you had an 8-track player in your car or your living room, you know exactly what I mean, and if you didn't, let me paint it for you. The 8-track was a fat plastic cartridge, and you pushed it into the slot, and the music came out warm and a little muffled, and it was wonderful, right up until the moment the tape reached the end of a program. And then, with no warning and no mercy, you'd hear it. Ka-chunk! A loud mechanical clunk as the player jumped to the next track, sometimes right in the middle of the chorus, cutting the song clean in half with a little fade and a hiss before it picked up again. You learned to expect it. You'd be singing along and you'd brace yourself and ka-chunk, there it was, and there was no rewinding, not really, no skipping to the song you wanted in any quick way. You took the tape as it came, all the way through, and if your favorite song was on the third program, you waited for it, and the order of those songs got burned into your memory so deep that even now, hearing one of them, your mind reaches automatically for whatever came next on the tape. The cartridges wore out too, the tape stretching and warbling, the music going wobbly and slow, and sometimes the thing would jam and spill its brown ribbon out into your hands in a hopeless tangle, and you'd sit there in the driveway trying to wind it back in with a pencil. We laughed about it even then. Nobody misses the inconvenience. But that clunk was the sound of a whole era of driving with the windows down, your arm out in the wind, the radio and the tape player the only entertainment in the whole car, and I'd give a lot to hear it just once more. Number 4. The needle dropping onto a record and that warm crackle before the music starts. Now this is a holy sound, and I don't use that word lightly. You'd slide the record out of its paper sleeve, holding it by the edges the way your father taught you so you wouldn't smudge it. You'd set it on the turntable and watch it spin. And then you'd lift the tone arm, ever so gently, and lower the needle down into that outer groove. And before the first note ever played, you'd hear it. That soft, intimate crackle and pop. Psh! Crackle. Pop. The sound of the needle settling into the groove, the sound of a little dust, the sound of anticipation itself. And then the music swelled up out of it, big and warm and alive in a way I'm not sure I've heard since. Today the music is perfect and it's everywhere and it costs almost nothing, and you summon any song ever recorded by saying its name out loud to the air. That's a miracle, truly. But there's no crackle. There's no ritual. There's no holding the thing in your hands and lowering the needle like you're setting down something precious. The music just appears, clean and cold, and disappears the same way. And there was a whole evening built around that needle, do you remember? You'd sit on the floor with the album cover in your lap, reading every word on the back, studying the photographs, the lyrics printed on the paper sleeve, while the record played all the way through. Side 1, and then you'd get up and flip it for side 2. You listened to the whole thing, in order, the way the people who made it intended, because that's how it came. You didn't skip around. You didn't shuffle. You let the record tell its story start to finish, and you knew every pop and scratch on your favorite ones, the little flaws that became part of the song to you, so that years later, hearing that song clean and perfect somewhere else, something felt missing, because your ear was waiting for the crackle that wasn't there. Number 5. The television turning off and that little white dot that hung in the dark. You remember this? I know you do. At the end of the night, you'd push the button or turn the knob, and the picture didn't just vanish the way it does now. The whole screen would collapse, all at once, down into a single bright white dot right in the center of the glass, and that dot would glow there in the dark for a second or two, maybe longer on an old set, before it slowly faded away to nothing, whooshed, and the room would go dark and quiet, There was something almost magical about it, that the whole world of the television could shrink down to one little star and then wink out. Children used to wait for it, faces close to the screen, watching that dot fade. The televisions we have now switch off instant and total, black as a stone, no ceremony at all. That little white dot was the sound and the sight of the day being over, of it being time for bed, and a whole generation of children watched it disappear. And here's what came just before that dot, in the late hours. The stations actually signed off. The television didn't run all night long the way it does now. Somewhere past midnight they'd play the national anthem and show a flag waving, and then the screen would go to that loud, snowy static, that gray, roaring hiss of nothing at all, and that meant the day was truly done. Even the television had gone to bed. If you were up that late, sick maybe, or sneaking, you'd see it, and there was something lonesome and final about it, the whole broadcast world shutting its eyes until morning. The idea that the television could ever stop, could ever simply be over for the night, is a thing our grandchildren cannot even imagine. In a world where every screen glows all night, every night, and nothing is ever finished. If you're smiling right now, if these sounds are bringing the pictures back, then I'd be so glad to have you sitting with us regularly. Just tap that subscribe button, no fuss, and you'll be right here for the next walk down memory lane. We're a gentle bunch here, folks who remember, folks who believe the old sounds were worth keeping. You belong with us. Now, let's keep listening, because we're only getting started, and remember, there's still that one sound waiting near the end, the one that isn't a machine at all. Number 6. The heavy ka-chunk of the television channel knob turning through the dial. Before there was a remote control resting on the arm of the couch, there was you, getting up off the floor, walking across the room, and turning the channel by hand. The knob was a sturdy thing, and it didn't turn smooth. It went click, ka-chunk, click, ka-chunk, through each channel with a solid mechanical stop, and most of those channels were nothing but snow and static and that loud gray hiss, because you only really got 3 or 4 stations and the rest was just fuzz. You'd turn it all the way around the dial, ka-chunk, ka-chunk, hunting for something worth watching, and your father would call out from his chair, "Leave it, that's fine." Right there. And there it stayed, because changing it meant getting up again. We have 1,000 channels now, and we hold the whole thing in one hand, and we still say there's nothing on. That heavy ka-chunk was the sound of a family that watched together, because there was only the one set and only one person turning the knob. Number 7. The clack of a typewriter and the little bell at the end of the line. If you ever sat at a real typewriter, this lives in your bones. Each key was a small effort, a real push, and each letter struck the page with a sharp, satisfying clack, and the whole machine shook just slightly with the rhythm of it. Clackety, clackety, clack. And when you reached the end of a line, a little bell would ring, ding, a polite warning that you were running out of room, and then you'd reach up and shove the carriage back across with a zip and a thunk to start the next line. There was no delete key. A mistake meant starting over, or painting it out with a little brush of white. The words you typed were committed the instant you struck them, and there was a kind of courage in that. Today we type in silence on soft glass, and we move words around like furniture, deleting whole pages with no cost at all. But there's no clack, there's no bell. There's no zip and thunk of the carriage return, that sound that meant a person was sitting down, thinking hard, putting real words onto a real page that would actually stay there. Number 8. The clink of the milkman's glass bottles on the front step at dawn. Now this one was already fading by the 70s, but in plenty of neighborhoods you could still hear it, and if you grew up with it, you never forget it. Early, before the sun was fully up, while the house was still asleep, you'd hear it through the window, the soft rattle and clink of glass bottles being set down on the porch, the empties from yesterday being lifted away, the quiet footsteps, the little truck idling at the curb, clink, clink. And in the morning there'd be cold milk on the step in glass bottles, the cream risen to the top, ready for breakfast. Somebody had come while you slept, and left fresh milk at your door and known your name and known how many bottles your family took. We don't hear that anymore. The milk comes in a plastic jug from a store under buzzing lights, and nobody brings it, and nobody knows your name. That little clink of glass at dawn was the sound of a world that came to your door and looked after you, quietly, before you even woke. Number 9. The slap of a wooden screen door swinging shut behind you. This is the sound of summer itself. You'd come tearing in from outside or banging out the door to go, and that wooden screen door on its big stretch spring would swing shut behind you and smack against the frame with a sound like nothing else. Whap! And then a little bounce. Whap! Whap! As it settled. Your mother would holler, "Don't slam that door," and you'd already be halfway across the yard. That sound meant children running free, in and out all day long, the inside and the outside of a house all mixed together in the warm months. It meant supper was almost ready and somebody was coming in. The doors we have now sealed shut with a soft whisper and a click, tight and quiet and climate-controlled. There's no slap, there's no spring. There's no whap-whap of a screen door announcing that a child has just burst into the world or out of it at a dead run. And there was a smell that went with it too, didn't there? The warm summer air pouring through that screen, the cut grass and the supper cooking and the rain coming, and the screen itself, that dusty metal smell when you pressed your nose against it to look out. The whole house breathed in the summer because of that door. The inside and the outside all one thing. We've sealed ourselves up tight since then, cool and quiet and shut away from the weather, and we hardly hear the world outside at all anymore. That old screen door let it all the way in, the sounds and the smells and the children, and it announced every coming and going with that honest wooden slap. Let me pause right here, just a moment, because you've been so kind to sit and listen this long. If these old sounds are stirring something warm in you, do an old fellow a favor and make sure you've tapped subscribe, so the next one of these finds its way to you. We keep the old days alive here, one memory at a time, and it means the world to have you along. Now, back to the listening, because we're getting closer to that sound I promised you. Number 10. The roar and rattle of metal roller skates on a concrete sidewalk. These weren't the smooth, quiet skates of today. These were metal, with metal wheels, and they clamped right onto the bottom of your regular shoes, and when a whole gang of kids went rolling down the sidewalk on them, the whole street knew it. It was a roar, a grinding, metallic rumble, whirr, that you could hear from a block away, the wheels catching every crack and seam in the pavement, ka-chunk, ka-chunk, rattling your teeth and your ankles. You'd skin your knees raw and get right back up. The polished, smooth wheels they ride now make hardly any sound at all. But that grinding metal roar on the sidewalk was the sound of a long summer afternoon with nowhere you had to be, the sound of childhood moving under its own power, loud and free and just a little bit dangerous. Number 11. The tune of the ice cream truck drifting down the street on a hot afternoon. Oh, every child in America knew this one, and the sound of it could empty a house in 30 seconds flat. That tinkling, slightly warped, slightly off-key little melody played on what sounded like a music box wired to a loudspeaker, coming closer and closer down the block. Ding-ding-a-ling, ding-ding-ding-a-ling. And the moment you heard it, faint and far off, your head would snap up and you'd go tearing into the house, begging your mother for a quarter and racing back out before the truck could pass you by. You'd stand at the curb with your coins in your sweaty fist, and the truck would roll up, and you'd get your treat, and the whole afternoon was made. And there was a whole science to it, a whole strategy. You learned to listen for it the way a sailor listens for weather, and the moment that first faint note reached you, the clock started. Could you find your mother? Could you find a quarter? Could you get back to the curb in time? Sometimes you missed it, and you'd hear that tune fade away down the next street over, taking your fudge bar with it, and the disappointment was almost too much to bear on a hot day. But when you made it, when you stood there panting at the window of that truck and pointed at the picture of the very thing you wanted, the rocket pop or the drumstick or the bomb pop with the 3 colors, and the man handed it down to you cold and dripping. Why, there was no finer feeling in all the world. That sound is mostly gone now, and where it survives, the children stay inside. But for a generation, that warped little tune was the very sound of summer joy arriving and the panic of chasing it down the street before it turned the corner and was gone. Number 12. The crackle and squawk of a CB radio. The 70s were the great age of the CB, and if your father or your uncle had one mounted under the dash of the car or the truck, you remember the sound of it filling the cab. That hiss of static, that sudden burst of a stranger's voice crackling through, breaker, breaker, 1 to 9, all the funny handles and the road talk and the warnings about what was up ahead. Case, you got a copy on me? KSSHT. It was a whole secret world riding the airwaves, voices of truckers and travelers you'd never meet, crackling in and out as you drove through the dark. People talked to strangers 100 miles away, just to pass the time, just to say hello, just to know somebody else was out there on the road that night. The crackle of the CB is mostly silent now, replaced by satellites and screens that never hiss and never surprise you. But there was a real magic in that static, in not knowing whose voice would come through next. On a long night drive with the family asleep in the car and the highway empty and dark, that crackling radio was company, a reminder that out there in all that darkness, other folks were rolling along too, watching the same white lines, heading somewhere of their own. A friendly voice would warn you about a slowdown ahead, or just wish you a good night and safe travels. Total strangers looking out for one another across the airwaves, asking nothing in return. That's a kind of neighborliness that has just about vanished from the road, and from a lot of places besides. We all carry devices now that could let us talk to anyone on Earth, and somehow we talk to fewer strangers than ever. That crackle was the sound of people reaching out into the dark just to say, I'm here. You're not alone out here. Drive safe. Number 13. The flickering whir of a home movie projector in a dark living room. When the relatives came over, sometimes your father would pull out the projector and the folding screen, or just aim it at a bare white wall and turn off the lights, and then it would start. That soft mechanical whir, the clatter of the film feeding through the sprockets, the warm light cutting through the dark and the dust hanging in the beam. Whir, clicketa, clicketa, clicketa. And up on the wall, silent and a little jumpy, there you all were, last Christmas, the summer at the lake, somebody's wedding, everybody waving at the camera and laughing without sound. The film would sometimes slip or flap loose at the end, flap, 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 and your father would scramble to catch it. We have 1,000 videos now, every moment captured, all of it silent and instant and stored in a little glass box, but there's no whir. There's no gathering in the dark, the whole family in one room, watching their own lives flicker on the wall while the projector hummed its warm mechanical song. Number 14. The metal roller skate key, jingling on a string around your neck. I had to give this one its own number, because so many of you will feel it the second I say it. Those metal clamp-on skates I told you about, they had to be tightened onto your shoes with a special little key, a skate key, and you wore it on a shoestring around your neck so you'd never lose it, because without it your skates were just useless metal. And all day long, as you ran and played, that key bounced and jingled against your chest, a little metal jingle that meant you were ready to skate at a moment's notice. Tink tink against your shirt buttons. A whole generation wore that key like a badge. The skates are gone, the key is gone, and most folks today have never held one or felt it swinging on its string. But say the word skate key to anyone of a certain age, and watch their hand go right up to their chest, remembering. Number 15, and here it is, the one I told you to listen for, all the way back at the beginning. Because the last sound on my list isn't a machine at all, it's a voice. It's the sound of a mother standing on the back porch at dusk, in that blue-gray light when the street lights were just coming on, cupping her hands around her mouth and calling her children home. Each family had its own call, its own particular music. Some mothers sang it 2 notes, the child's name stretched long across the evening. Some hollered it plain, supper time. Come on home now. And all over the neighborhood, as the light went soft and the fireflies came up out of the grass, you'd hear them, those voices floating across the yards and the fences, every mother calling her own, and every child knowing the exact sound of his own name and his own mother's voice across the dark. You could be 3 streets over, deep in a game, and you'd hear it, faint and far, and you'd say, "That's my mom, I gotta go." And you'd run. That sound is gone now. Children carry little phones, and a text arrives, silent in a pocket. No voice crosses the evening air. No name is sung across the yards at dusk. And I'll tell you the truth, of all the sounds we've lost, that's the one I'd give anything to hear just once more, because it wasn't really about supper. It was the sound of being wanted, the sound of somebody out there in the gathering dark who loved you, calling you home before night fell. And every one of us who heard it has carried it our whole lives long. I told you that one might bring a tear, and if it did, you're in good company, because it gets me every time. There's something about a mother's voice calling across the dusk that holds the whole of childhood inside it, the safety, the belonging, the certainty that no matter how far you wandered, somebody would call you back before dark. We grew up inside that sound, and it's gone so completely that our grandchildren don't even know it ever existed. But I don't want to leave you heavy-hearted, because here's the thing about all these lost sounds. They're not really lost, not while we still remember them. Every one of them lives on in folks like you and me, and as long as we can close our eyes and hear that needle drop, that screen door slap, that mother's voice across the yard, those sounds aren't truly gone. They're just waiting, the way a song waits in a record, for somebody to set the needle down. And maybe that's the real reason to tell these stories at all. Not to be sad about what's vanished, but to play it back one more time and to pass it along so that even our grandchildren might catch a faint echo of the world we grew up in. The world we lived in wasn't perfect, heaven knows, but it was full of warm, human, handmade sounds, the clack and the whir and the clink and the call, and there was a kind of richness in all that lovely noise that the smooth, silent world of today doesn't quite manage to replace. You know, I've come to believe that you can tell a great deal about a time by listening to it. The 70s clacked and rattled and whirred and crackled because so many of the things in it were made of metal and glass and effort, and they announced themselves, and they asked something of you. You dialed the phone, you dropped the needle, you turned the knob, you ran when you were called. The world today is quieter, smoother, easier, and I'm grateful for plenty of it. But I do miss being asked. I miss the little rituals and the warm, imperfect noises that meant a person was doing a thing with their own 2 hands. And I miss, most of all, the sound of a voice carrying across the evening air, calling the children in. So here's what I'd love from you tonight. Down in the comments below, tell me this. What was your mother's call? How did she sound when she called you home at dusk? What words, what notes, what names stretched long across the yard? Or if it wasn't your mother, tell me whose voice it was and what they said. Share it, because somebody reading needs to hear it, and together we can keep these old sounds alive a little longer. I read every single one, and they mean more to me than I can say. And if you've enjoyed listening back with me tonight, if any one of these old sounds brought the pictures flooding back, then do an old fellow a kindness and subscribe so we can do this again real soon. Next time, I want to take you back inside the family kitchen of the 1970s and walk you through the everyday gadgets and gizmos that every household had on the counter, the ones that have quietly disappeared, and the ones we foolishly let go of. You won't want to miss it. We'll keep the old world alive together, you and I, one memory at a time. So pour yourself one more cup, hold your people a little closer, and remember that the sweetest sounds in this life were never the ones that came from a screen. Take good care of yourself, and I'll see you next time.